Hello, it is a lovely sunny day here in the Big L, and I have a big group of new books that I want to chat to you about. So first off, there is a new novel, quite a short novel, you can see it's very slender, called The Appointment by Katharina Volckmer. And this is a novel about a young woman who goes to see a doctor, I think it's a psychiatric doctor, to talk through with him about her life and through her issues. And so she's a young woman who's moved to London from Germany several years ago, and how she wants to distance herself from her past, and how her grandfather died recently and issues to do with that. But they mainly talk about issues to do with identity and how fixed our identities are or how fluid our identities are. So it looks at that question, and I've heard really great things about this book, so I'm keen to read it. I also have a new novel by Chuck Palahniuk called The Invention of Sound, and Chuck Palahniuk is an author I'm not sure I like or not. I've read a few of his books, including Fight Club, and I always feel a bit conflicted about his writing, if he's just trying to shock with his writing or if he's really trying to say something substantial. So in this new novel, it's about a private detective who's in search of his missing daughter, and how he questions a sound engineer who works to produce the sounds of screams for Hollywood movies. But the sound engineer collects these screams by recording the actual sounds of people in the throes of death. And so, it's going to be a very dark tale, I'm sure, as all of Chuck Palahniuk's fiction is. Then, very excitingly, I have this group of new editions of translated fictions published by Vintage. And so you can see they're quite compact, and each book has French flaps on them. So first off, I'm very excited to have a book of short fiction by Yoko Ogawa called Revenge. And so I've loved reading the two novels of hers that I've read, The Memory Police and The Housekeeper and The Professor. And so her writing is so philosophical while also being really engaging and beautifully symbolic in what she does. And so this is obviously short stories about a whole range of subjects, from murderers and mourners to mothers and their children to lovers and innocent bystanders. Then there's a short novel I really like the sound of called In the Absence of Men by Philippe Besson. And this is about a 16-year-old boy who's left on his own in Paris in the summer of 1916 when all of the men have gone off to war, and he's sort of exploring himself, and he meets a young soldier who he has an affair with. Nada by Carmen Laforet. This is about an 18-year-old orphan named Andrea who moves to a battle-scarred Barcelona to start university on a scholarship, and moves to live there with her uncle and a group of misfits who she finds very difficult to live alongside while trying to pursue her independence. The Moustache by Emmanuel, Carrere. This is about a man who one day shaves off his mustache that he's had for a very long time just to amuse his wife and friends. But when none of them notice or pretend not to notice that there's been this change to his face, things turn very dark. And so, yeah, I'm very curious about this because, what happened if I shaved off my beard? Would anybody notice? Then there is another novel by Emmanuel Carrere called Class Trip, about a morbid and very excitable young boy who goes on a class trip, and when another boy goes missing, his thoughts turn very dark, and he tries to do detective work to find him. Distant Star by Roberto Bolano. This is about a unpromising young poet in Chile who finds themselves catapulted to the status of a celebrity poet after a military coup occurs in the country. And so the novel's sort of looking at how that occurred. Now, I've never read anything by Bolano before, so I'm quite tempted to read a short novel of his after, I think a lot of his other work is very long. The Search Warrant by Patrick Modiano. This is a Nobel Prize winning author, and the author found in an 1941 issue of Paris newspaper the story of a missing girl. And so he tries to find out everything he can about this missing girl, how she was on a list of deportees from Auschwitz, to everything he can find out about her, surrounding her family. So it sounds like a very intriguing story. And then finally from this group, there is The Door by Magda Szabo. So this is about a writer named Magda who takes on a domestic servant who has a reputation for being fiercely independent and strong-willed and eccentric. And it's about their relationship with each other. So that's the last book in this series, which I'm really glad that this has just been published, because after Women in Translation Month, it's nice to carry on and read more translated fiction throughout the year. Then I have a nonfiction book called Shakespearean by Robert McCrum. So this author suffered a very bad stroke, after which he found that words didn't really make sense to him. And one of the only things that did make sense to him that he read was passages from Shakespeare. So he sort of explores the importance of Shakespeare in our lives and why we always return to Shakespeare, especially during times of crisis, and sort of, the enduring influence of Shakespeare over time. Exit Management by Naomi Booth. This is a novel about a elderly man who lives in a very expensive London home that's filled with priceless works of art, and he's as he gets very ill and is nearing the end of his life, he just wants a sort of companion in his life. So he hires a young man just to be a friend to him, but the young man's girlfriend has other ideas about what he should do in this house of this elderly, very rich gentleman. It sounds like a very tense novel. The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. This is a book of essays written by a poet, where over the course of a tumultuous year, he recorded the ordinary delights that can be found in sort of the absurd things in our life. So it sounds like a very uplifting book during tumultuous times. Augury by S.E. Lister. This is a fantasy novel, and I don't often read that much fantasy novels, but I'm just kind of intrigued by the sound of this and the look of this. So this is about a ancient city who the earth beneath them begins to tremble, and they find that they think that the only way to stop this from happening is to, in the usual way of offering up sacrifices and gold to the gods. But there's a prophetess who can see that things aren't quite what they seem, and there's a growing resistance to stop the corruption from happening. Punching the Air by Ibi Zoboi and Yusef Salaam. So this is another young adult novel, but one with a very timely theme and story to it. It's about a young black Muslim man who's falsely accused of a crime and sent to prison, and it's one that the author has very first-hand experience of. That Salaam was, when he was a teenager, he and 4 other boys were falsely accused of an assault, and they were sent to prison for over 10 years before the real assailant was found, and he was cleared and released. And it's a very timely subject. And this is a novel that's written in verse, which sort of slightly scares me, but also kind of intrigues me. And then finally, I have the new novel by Ottessa Moshfegh, Death in Her Hands. I didn't actually buy this myself. My partner bought it, but my partner often takes my books. And I've been wanting to read Moshfegh's new novel, so I'm sort of glad the chance to pinch this novel from him for a change. I'll give it back, obviously. But yeah, so this novel's about a widowed woman who is taking her dog for a walk and finds a note pinned to a rock about the death of a woman, and so it's her sort of exploration about whether this is true or false, or obviously, as with I think a lot of Moshfegh's writing, it's very sort of dark and twisted, and I'm really curious to read more of her writing. So those are all the books I'm going to talk about. Let me know if you've read any of these or you're interested in reading any of these now in the comments below, and we can have a chat there. I hope you're doing well, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.